Okay, welcome back to the Wild Dog AI podcast. In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to Tonya Fines, who is going to share with us how she turned AI into her creative ally. Tonya, you started your career as a high school teacher. You were also involved with the staff on a hockey team in high school. Since then, you've worked in the farming industry. You've worked in health foods industry. You've had experience as a writer, an executive content creator. Today, you're a brand strategist, a columnist, a speaker, a best-selling author, and a podcaster. And if that's not enough, you've also written some books. And your most recent book was How to Become a Media Socialite, Monetize Your Passion. And in this book, Tanya, you talked about your proven strategies for anyone looking to reinvent themselves, build a network from scratch, and turn their passion into a thriving career. It's great to have you on the podcast today. It's a mouthful. You've obviously done some pretty impressive and incredible things in your career. So can we just start out? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of walk us through your career and how you got to where you are today?
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate being here, and we've talked before briefly, but it's really nice to sit down and do a podcast together. My career, yeah, it's kind of been varied and diverse, just because I'm someone that I need. It seems to be I need to have many irons in the fire or something. I don't know. Maybe it's the adult onset ADD. I'm not really sure, but basically, though, I've been a creative and interested in and doing writing since I was a little girl. I mean, that's my jam, is to write and create content and turn things into stories, because people love to be entertained. No matter what you're talking about, if you can entertain them, you're going to have their attention and get them to listen, which is really powerful, whether you're in sales or whether you're trying to get people on board to a cause or promote something. If you can capture their attention and entertain them, the power of words is amazing as your ally. So yeah, I started out as a high school teacher, and did a lot of work with at-risk middle and high school boys, boys that had spent some time in juvie. And so that was very interesting, because I was fresh out of university, 23 years old, and kind of thrown into the lion's den. But that was great and a lot of fun. And it probably gave me the best lessons in how to communicate with varying degrees of personalities. And so, yeah, from there, I got married, started a family, and my husband at the time, he was from a big farming ranching family. So I moved up north to the oil patch country, where we had winter basically 10 months of the year. And my dad grew up on a farm. So I've been around farms and doing that kind of stuff my whole life. So it wasn't a complete culture shock, but the climate certainly was. So did that for several years. And then we got to a point, we moved our family, we went to New Zealand and lived in New Zealand for 5 years, because we got to a point where we had done so much, and we had the ranch, and then we started a trucking company in the oil industry. And then I wanted to do my own thing. So I started my organic and health food store, and then got into nutrition counseling with working with people and putting people and food back into happy, healthy relationships. So we got to a point one evening we were just sitting around, and I said, like, what now? Like, we had done really, really well. We were really good at having an idea and then growing a company, like making a company and it doing really well. And I'm like, it's not like we need money or things or stuff. We can clearly do that, but what's our next great adventure? Like, what's the thing? What are we going to do with our kids? So we did what any normal, sane parents would do. And we thought, well, let's pull our kids out of school and everything they know, and let's move them to New Zealand. That's not going to rock the boat at all. It was a great experience. I mean, there was highs and lows. There was a lot of things that happened, but we did that. And then, I ended up, make a long story short, a lot of life happened between New Zealand and me being in the US, but I ended up here in Florida. And when you move countries, working again is not just as simple as getting off a plane and like getting a job anywhere. So there's a lot of fiery hoops you got to go through. And I always wanted like more of a career. So I could have, I bartended all through university. It was great, made great money. So I knew I could do that, but I still wanted to have an impact. I mean, I had impact as a teacher. I had impact in the industries that we worked at in Canada. I had impact when I brought my company to New Zealand, a health and wellness company. So I wanted to keep having an impact. Always came back to my roots of writing. And back in that time, copywriting, content stuff, it wasn't really an industry like it is now. I was doing that stuff for years because I was the only one to do it. When I would start a company, I would create content. I would do the flyers, the brochures, whatever. So it was something that I was always doing. And then when I realized, wow, this is something that can become a thing, I wanted to do more of that. So I slowly kind of I got hired by a company in Clearwater, and I was doing a lot of video content. And then I got, they loosened the reins, and I got to do a lot of website content for a division of the company, landing pages, email campaigns, all of that. So I really got to stretch my creative legs in terms of writing content for various reasons, bringing attention to health and wellness, bringing attention to products. So, and then of course I was like, well, why not just try to go out on my own? And then ended up in Tampa, sort of middle of COVID. And I didn't know a single person in the city, and I needed to pay rent.
Amazing.
So I had to quickly figure out, how am I going to make people know that I'm here, and what do I do so I could, support myself. And here I am today.
Wow. What an incredible story. And before we jump into the topic of the podcast, what you just shared with us, I think, is such an incredible entrepreneurial story. And you've had to start over so many times.
That's
right.
My
And there's, yeah, there you go. That's actually what I was going to suggest.
2.0.
Well, and it's interesting, the parallels, though, because with AI that we're going to get into here in a second, a lot of people are starting over, right? Because they're being forced to learn these new skills. It's uncomfortable. It's a major change for a lot of folks. So can you just share with our listeners, because of your background and your incredible experience, as they start to transition into AI, as some of them are probably starting over in new careers, right? Because everybody's reading, these articles about AI is going to take everybody's job. Not sure that that's entirely true, but it's certainly on the top of people's minds. So if I were a young professional, and my career is being impacted by AI and I have to start over again, what are some words of wisdom you could share with them about having to start over again and enter into a new space, maybe even a new area?
My first suggestion would be just stop and take a breath. And if you have any kind of military background, you may have heard, not you specifically, buddy, but to your listeners, if you're familiar with the term box breathing, I would suggest start practicing that, because it can help when your anxiety gets a little high. Because AI and things like ChatGPT and Gemini, all these platforms can feel very threatening, because it's like anything, when as technology advances, sometimes the need for a human being to do something is taken out of the equation. We don't need the human being to do it, because we don't need to pay a machine or a technological platform to produce what we're looking for. So it can become very threatening. But if you get into that mindset, you are going to get in that spiral, and you're not going to see where the opportunities are in that. So I would say pause, take a breath, and realize that this is a tool that can actually help you in your new venture. You have to be able to see where does that fit in to help you promote what you're doing, what your ideas are, what your causes are, what you're passionate about. Because the one thing that AI cannot give us is that human element. It can't give us that human connection. And as wonderful as it is in terms of coming up with, really quality content as far as, facts and data, and it does it quickly. I mean, it can save you hours. It can save you weeks. That is something, I'm going to challenge people, just take a 2-degree mind shift with something like that. If you're working on a project, or you have an idea, or you're starting over, if you can see the potential for how much you can do, because it's going to save you all of that time, you can really focus on the creative human element and saturate what AI is giving you with all of that to actually produce a much greater product.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly valuable, and I love the fact that you labeled it as a tool, because that's kind of how I've looked at it too. It's probably one of the most incredible tools we have at our disposal now, but it's just a tool. Can you share with us what do you mean by a 2-degree shift in mindset? What does that mean?
I mean, just, it's really, if your mindset is like, oh my goodness, AI, ChatGPT, I'm going to either lose my job, or I can't, it's starting over. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. There's no value. If you get caught up in that, it's like anything. If you get caught up into that mindset, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a lot more closed doors, no's, and it's actually going to completely stop any creative vision you have. It's going to get in the way. It's going to put up this filter that's going to be very difficult to see through. But if you can it takes very little to go, wait a second, how does this help me? And where are the opportunities to, like a muscle, exercise that to give me something that's going to be better and stronger with a greater impact, greater output, and a much larger, more impactful ripple effect.
Yeah, I love your optimism in how you explain that, because some of the folks I've talked to, they've come to me like, I'm really worried about losing my job, or how is this going to impact my career? And I've asked them, like, instead of looking at it, and by the way, by innately, I am a very optimistic person. I'm not a glass half full guy. I'm like, my glass is sort of overflowing, right? That's how
Yeah.
optimistic I am sometimes.
Yeah.
But what I try to tell folks is, one, I think AI is going to create a lot more entrepreneurial opportunities for people, right?
Absolutely.
No, there's no reason, right? There's so many opportunities for people to create new businesses, add value to their customers, or pursue some of their passions they may not have been able to do before. A good example is when I first came into business, it took me like 6 months to a year to get that business up and running with the paperwork. With this new business, I think we were up and running in like a week, just because we were able to use AI to help with a lot of the things that we, had to do manually before.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
but
that's the
and
opportunity. There's a
yeah,
beautiful example of an opportunity and what it does to support what your dream is, what your goal is.
right, exactly. So I've been telling folks, like, instead of thinking about it from the perspective of how's it going to impact my life negatively, or how's it going to take my job, I've said, take out a piece of paper and write down all the ideas you have on how it can positively impact your career. Write down some of the things you haven't been able to do, and how could AI help you maybe do that now. And I think that's just a really, really good sort of mental exercise for folks, to force them to sort of see the upside of this and not just continue to see the downside. So, and I was reading, I actually made a post about this yesterday. I think GPT-01, and this is something I've been paying attention to for a while, because when I started this new company with our other founders, I was just blown away by how incredibly sophisticated these language models were, and how they were being trained, and how they were evolving so quickly. And as of, I think, this week, GPT-01, which is a reasoning model, it achieved an IQ score of 120, which is
Wow.
incredible.
That
Yeah,
is incredible. Yeah.
right. And I think like less than 9% of humans on planet Earth right now have a score above 120. It has achieved some pretty incredible, and we're just talking 1.5 years, 2 years of evolution here. So this is pretty impressive. So it's becoming, not only is it a powerful tool today, it's getting better and better every single day. So like you were saying, I think it's important for people to stay on top of the technology and continue to stay abreast on exactly how it's evolving. But I think this is a good segue into what we wanted to jump into. So Tanya, I know you're doing several things right now. You've got some pretty awesome stuff going on. Can you talk to us a little bit about how AI is impacting your business today?
Right.
Some of the positives of how you
Yeah.
leveraged it.
Well, initially, I was, to be completely transparent and honest, when ChatGPT kind of first hit mainstream, I was like, shit, this is going to impact what I'm doing. And it's, and the truth is I did lose some contracts. Now, it wasn't necessarily because ChatGPT or any of those platforms could write better than I could. I can write better. I mean, it's helpful. But I mean, again, I have the human element. If I'm sitting across from you and interviewing you because you need content for your landing page, I can get things from you that typing prompts into a computer isn't going to get. I mean, I'm sitting there with you. I can feel your energy. I can feel your passion. So I can saturate the content with that, whereas, technology necessarily can't. But when I say I lost contracts, a lot of that had to do with more economical, what was happening in the world. And things have been difficult for a lot of people. They were pulling back, people were getting laid off. And I was a niche market. I was getting really good gigs and contracts to do what I love and getting paid very well for it. And then when companies were getting hit with, inflation and just the economics of what was happening in the world, they had to pull back somewhere. It's like anything. If you're living a very good life and you can get your manicures, every couple of weeks and all of that, all of a sudden, if you find, you can't work for whatever reason, some of those little extras, you take them out of the equation because you have to. So for a couple months there, I was like, no, what's going to happen? But, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to get on board with this. So I'm going to have to be able to promote myself as someone that I'm still your content person. I can still do your posts and whatever you need. And I'm actually really good with using AI to help add things that maybe are going to take me weeks to research and find. Or, if I'm writing your content and all of a sudden I get hit with writer's block, because that's a real thing and it happens. I can take a chunk of what I've written, put it into one of those platforms and just prompt it a bit. And sometimes it's just one word or one sentence that that platform spits out. I'm like, okay, I just needed that. And then I'm off and running again. Did I answer the question?
You did. And actually, no, you did. And actually, I've thought about that before. One of the things you just brought up that I think is so important is there is like being authentic, right? With AI, I think that is one of the downsides and probably a niche market that you're stepping into is I think a lot of people suspect that everybody's using AI now, right? So like now when you read stuff, like everybody's looking for the indicators of, okay, this is probably AI. You can see this post was generated using AI. So there's some things there that people can see, but that authenticity, I think, is going to become so much more valuable, right? Like the services you're offering, your ability to separate people from what they're reading on all these AI posts. So what are your thoughts on that authenticity? Because I feel like, everybody loves a great book. You've got a lot of experience writing. And what makes a good book is, in my opinion, is your ability to connect with the writer, the authenticity of the writer, the uniqueness of the writer. And what you just touched on is you providing those services to your customers. You're really adding that value of authenticity. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and what you think, how important you think that's going to become moving forward?
I think very important, and especially with ChatGPT and Gemini, all of that. Well, I'll just go to AI blanket say AI because there's so many out there, and there's more coming. Right? It's just exploding with it. Like when it hit mainstream, it did blow up because all of a sudden now everybody's writing a book, everybody's making a course because it was easy to do. And hey, if you can do that, if you got a great idea that should be a book or a course, why not do it? If you've got something fantastic that can be out there helping people, I say go for it. If you're strictly relying on AI to help you do it, okay, great. However, a lot of platforms like Amazon, like when I wrote my last book, when you submit, even like self-publishing, when you submit that stuff into Amazon, it scans it. I don't know much about that stuff, but it has a way to pick up if the majority, there's a certain percentage. If your content is X percent AI generated, your manuscript, your book, it gets rejected. Amazon will not publish it, or they make it very difficult, and you kind of get flagged too. So the authenticity element is going to be massively important because even now, like I will see things, they'll come across, my email and stuff, and I'm like, that's absolutely AI generated. The grammar is excellent. The wording is excellent. It's great content. It reads beautifully, but it's missing something. It's missing the magic. So, using AI kind of like your Swiss Army knife, you can pull out what you need when you need it. Do you need a screwdriver? Do you need a bottle opener? Pulling out the exact thing that you need to help you get past something or to, do a task that you're struggling with is wonderful. But if you're not injecting some humanity, some emotion, something personal, something intimate, I think you do risk losing a few things. One, I think you risk losing maybe some of your audience because again, people want to be entertained and people want to feel like you hear them. So if you're replying kind of robotically or speaking, not that it's robotic, but if it's very generic, people are going to feel like they're not heard. You don't hear the pain point. You're not understanding them. And people want to belong to something, want to feel like they belong to something. And the only, one of the ways to make people feel like they belong to something, and this is for those people out there that are running like subscription services or like weekly or monthly newsletters, people want to belong to something. So when you're putting the words down, you have to be able to connect on a human level with your audience because you will lose them. And again, the entertainment factor too. People want to be entertained. Not all of us are naturally good at comedy or humor, but you don't have to be. It can be a very serious topic. It can be a very sad topic. And if you're able to pour that human element into it, then I think you have a much better winning combination than just relying on what your prompts allow the AI to spit back at you. So authenticity, I think it's going to become more and more important in terms of I'll call it your product getting scanned and possibly flagged as there's nothing human here. And also in terms of your audience. So if you know your audience, which you should, before you start putting content out there, you should have a pretty good idea of what your market is, who are the people that are coming to you and listening to you. You need to be able to speak to them as a human being.
Yeah. And it's pretty obvious too. Like some of my colleagues, they used to make like one sentence posts on LinkedIn. And now all of a sudden, it's like 3 paragraphs. It's like,
Right, because you can
right.
type this, and then now LinkedIn has a, I think, I don't know if it's free, if it's paid for it, or if it's with the premium, because LinkedIn has a different different levels. But I notice when I'm doing my post, it'll say, "Do you want AI? Try AI to rewrite it." And I'm like, "No, I don't. For me, no, I would rather write it myself." But again, if you're somebody that's not very creative, and if you struggle to write something that is authentic, absolutely use it. But you're going to have to figure out how to put some of yourself into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently spoke at USF to a graduating class of sales and marketing professionals. And one of the questions they asked me that I'd love to get your opinion on is, it seemed like in some of their classes, the professors were very, very positive and supportive of them using AI. In some places, they just absolutely couldn't use it. What are your thoughts on, with your experience as a teacher and writing, what are your thoughts on students using AI?
Right. Well, a lot of the students I worked with were incredibly, like, very brilliant, very, very wise, like, wise beyond their years, but, didn't test well, struggled with writing things out, but expressively were very good at expressing themselves when they were talking. So I think when you're like, again, when you have the idea, you know exactly what you want to create, start writing, like, just start writing. When you learn how to accurately and best prompt an AI platform, definitely use it to help. As I look at it as like a supplement. You know, if you exercise, you're getting sleep, you're drinking water, if you're doing 80% of the things really well and right, you're probably going to live a long, healthy, happy life. Now, sometimes we can't, if you travel a lot, depending on what your work schedule is like, or maybe you've got a bunch of, like 3 or 4 kids and 6 dogs, and you're volunteering at the PTA and you're doing all this stuff, you're on the run a lot. So you might not always be able to sit down to a home cooked meal 3 times a day. So we supplement. We supplement to keep ourselves going. So I look at AI. I think AI, if it's used ethically, it can be an excellent supplement to help people that have something great to say, but they do need some help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of how I've looked at it. And again, we talked about this. It's sort of here to stay, and it's going to keep evolving. So initially, I was on the side of the argument that, maybe kids shouldn't be using this in school. But of course, I also thought about like the calculator. I'm sure that when the
Right.
calculator was invented, teachers were like, well, using a calculator is cheating. And I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but my one of my daughters who goes to school here, high school, on her school supply list is a calculator now, right? So it's sort of become normalized. Everybody's accepted kids will use calculator. And that's been going on for a long time. And so I'm just waiting to see, like, when, like, a subscription to some sort of generative AI software is also going to be on their list,
Right.
or
Well, I
something.
know,
So
I know a few people that are working like through masters and PhDs, and I mean the AI component is like absolutely like no, this because again, there's a bunch of different avenues for this. I think in schools, kids that are struggling, again, a resource like I can remember back in the day, like when I was in junior high, high school, they had teachers assistants for those kids that were having trouble, like they needed some help, so they had a person that worked with them to help them interpret their homework, help them with their homework, so that they could be successful. So just because somebody struggles with language, or they struggle getting the words out, whatever, people with dyslexia, people with learning challenges, I think, to tell them they can't use something to help them be successful, well, then that sucks, because we want people to be successful, and people want to feel successful, and certainly they don't want to feel stupid or ashamed of having to use resources to help them. That's why we have them to help you. So I think in that element it's great. Now when you get to in certain arenas, clearly it's like, well, I want to know what you learned. I don't want to know what AI told you learned. What did you get? Because how else can I kind of even evaluate myself if I'm a teacher or I'm a mentor or in some kind of leadership position or management position? The best way to know the job I'm doing is to sit down and talk with and have my students or my peers evaluate me. And so, I don't want them asking AI, because then I have no way to measure how good a job am I doing. right?
Yeah, and I feel like we could have a whole podcast on this because we're sort of just
Absolutely.
talking about, right? We're sort of talking about, us as individuals using AI, but the other side of the equation, which I found incredibly and equally as beneficial, is, taking like gray literature or large, medical documents, or I kind of built my own GPT recently to monitor my health. But now I can take like large academic articles and white papers and look through. I don't have to read them all anymore. I can now just ask the papers for the data I'm looking for. And so I think there's a lot of efficiencies on the other side of that equation too that's going to,
Absolutely.
help with the learning process. So, but to jump into the next topic, I know that you've been using Indago, and in full transparency, Indago is one of our technologies, but you're also using some other tools as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about, can you share with us your experience using these technologies that you've tested out? What are the positives? Where have you run into some issues?
Yeah.
And what are some advice to our listeners in terms of their experimentation with AI?
Right. Okay. So when my initial step walk in the AI world was using like Chat GPT, because I had a friend that said, my gosh, you need to check this out. It's going to save you so much time. And I thought, okay. And at first I didn't really know how to use it. Like, I just thought, well, this isn't really that great. I mean, I write way better. Like, I don't know. This probably has a niche, but it's not for me. And then once I actually kind of took some time and went, okay, I'm hearing a lot about this. I'm starting to lose some work because of this. I need to figure this thing out and know what it's about. And so when I started to understand it and about prompting, I was like, okay. And again, initially, it really helped me when I was stuck. Like, I was in the flow and just writing, and it was feeling good. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I just had the words weren't coming, or I would read like the last few sentences and go, that just, all of this is great, but this is terrible. And I can't end on this note. So it was basically, I used it as a resource, as a tool to get me unstuck. I would put like a couple sentences or a couple prompts into ChatGPT, because that was the one I would go to the most, because didn't even know about Indago at that time. And I would put, a few sentences and prompts in, see what it would spit back. And I'd be like, okay, I like these words, or I like the way this sentence is. This is how I need to reframe what I'm working on. So it was giving me great feedback to do better with my own words. Now, when I spoke with Jesse and we were talking about Indago, it took me a while, and I'm still learning Indago, because had no idea how to prompt that platform at all for my needs. Like, because I work in the creative realm, and Indago, I was like, wow, this is great for like reports, if you're doing like some kind of research, like researching news and data and all of that, which I didn't really need a lot of. I needed research and data. I went to like my subscription services to like the health platforms that I belong to, and I could just type in and boom, pull up whatever clinical trial I needed to get the information I wanted. So with Indago, I was like, I don't know how to use this. So it sat for months in my tabs, and I would just be like, I don't know. So then I finally was like, okay, I have to figure this out. And had a call with Jesse, and they kind of walked me, and because they were actually looking for my feedback. They're like, well, what do you need? I said, I need like an SOP for somebody like
Yeah.
me. I can see how I can totally see your platform in like cyber, military, totally, like absolutely bang, like how somebody in those industries could just get in there and start prompting and get what they needed. I said, but for me, I don't know how to use it yet, and I don't know what to ask it. So we sat. It took like a good chunk of time, because at the time I had already written my book and I wanted to turn it into a course, and I knew that was going to take me months to do. And I thought, if there's some way, and I already had the content. The content for the course was the book. I didn't need content, but I needed some way to kind of give me some outline, some sort of frame, so I could establish what these modules were going to look like, and how one was going to segue into the next. And so once I sat with them and they kind of walked me through the first two or three, I was like, this is brilliant. I mean, this would have taken me months. And I had basically 7 course module outlines done for me in about 2 hours. So then now I can take those outlines, and then I can kind of walk through them and go, okay, I need to plug that content in there. And it gave me the framework where to take the content from my book, where it best fit into the course, and how I wanted the course to flow for people that buy it.
And so that was using Indago. Have you experimented with any other AI tools, or
Um,
ChatGPT and Indago? Are they kind of your go-tos?
ChatGPT and Indago would be the two biggest ones. I played with Gemini. There's Gemini and there's another one, Claude. But those were because there's so many, they're coming out so quickly. It's hard to keep up with them. So I kind of like to, what do I like the most and stick to like that one or two. Cause you can get, I think you could get easily lost in the weeds with it. So I think depending on what you're looking, like, first of all, which one are you comfortable with? I mean, whichever platform you're most comfortable with, I would say stick with it because it's going to work well for you. But I don't, it's love that there's all these different kinds because some of them have strong, some of them are strong than other ones. So again, finding what works for you, finding what fits your industry, which one are you comfortable using? There's so many. I'm just like, I could spend months again, just like playing in all of them,
Yeah.
but then I'd never get anything done.
Well, and I love the fact that you took the time to actually learn the different models, because there are strengths and weaknesses in each model, and I think that's, as more models come to the market, which we're seeing more, as the price sort of comes down to train these models, cost of GPUs comes down. There's going to be more models out there, and so I think it is so important to just really spend some time with the model and really learn what it's good at, what it's not good at, and you may have to use different models for different purposes. And so I like, and that's what I encourage people to do is don't just take what the model is telling you and run with it. Like, take your time to really understand how the output of the model, and what
Right.
those. As a matter of fact, you probably saw in Indago, one of the recent features we added was this bias detection tool. And what that is we've actually taken and trained our own model. We didn't build our own model, obviously that's very expensive. But we've trained another model, brought some APIs into it, and what that allows users to do is essentially use a special purpose model that we've trained to keep the general purpose models like the GPTs and the Claudes of the world in check. And I think that's such an important part of the technology as we go forward is these models think so quickly, they adapt so quickly, and they evolve so fast that I do think part of moving forward is people are going to have to use models sort of against each other to QC each other to get the best output. Um,
Oh yeah.
and so that's why we released that bias detection feature. I've enjoyed it so far. So Tanya, just as we get towards the end here, can you give us just some tangible tidbits about some of your lessons learned using AI? I know we've talked about it a little bit here and there throughout our conversation, but can you kind of sum that up for our listeners? What are some major lessons learned using AI for you so
Mm.
far?
The big things would be, again, it's infinite value as a resource and a tool, to help well, save time, number one. That would be the big one. And to not be afraid of that. There's nothing wrong with saving yourself time. We all want more time. Of course, we get more, I don't know if you're like me, you get more free time and you fill it up with more work. But
That's
ultimately
right.
it saves a lot of time. Also, I would say the big thing is you can't go into it, or I no shouldn't say you can't, you can do whatever you want, but I would strongly advise, make sure you have a very clear, like, what do you want, what is it you're wanting to create. I think just going into Chat GPT or Indago or Gemini, Claude, any of these, and be like, well, I want to write a book. Great. About what? And are you writing about something that you know something about? Because if you're not, that's gonna be very inauthentic, and your readers are gonna get that in the first couple chapters. They're gonna be like, there's something missing, right? So I think, again, the value is a resource and a tool to save you time and to help you, because it can come up with great. It's amazing how sometimes I would get, again, like that writer's block. I get stuck, and a simple word like adventurous, and think, why could I not think of that word? But, it's just one of those moments where, like, if you've been writing for 2 hours, your brain gets tired. Now, probably what I should do is just get up and go for a walk, but, like, no, I'm very stubborn. I want to finish.
Yeah.
So putting something in and just coming up with simple words that you might not have thought of because your brain's full of other things. But you really do, if you have a concept and you're very specific on that concept. And I talk about this in the book about, like, your why and just really narrowing down, you're going to produce something much better than if you just go into it like, well, I'm going to write a book about, how to be a good volunteer or something. Again, it's still a broad topic. So you need to make sure you are choosing to create something that you know something about. Do your research. make sure you know enough to actually create something so that you're not completely relying on an AI platform to produce the whole thing for you. And don't rely on it to create all of that. Have that concept, be very clear about that, because what your outcome is going to be much more authentic, much more organic, much more entertaining. You're going to develop trust and rapport with your audience. That's the other thing. If you're generating something that you really didn't put any of yourself into, it's very hard for your people to trust you.
That's a very good point.
That
Yeah.
comes into the ethics again. You use it if you're using it ethically, I think it's going to, it has the potential to do a lot of good things for a lot of people and the world, like in what we can create with it. I mean, it's being used in like the visuals now, like some of the AI generated stuff visually, business cards, just stuff like that. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal what you can do with it. And we're still, in my opinion, in almost the conception phase of this. Like it is still relatively new. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine in even 2 years time what this is going to look like.
Yeah, and I really like that you touched on time, because that's our most valuable resource,
Mm-hmm.
and I save so much time now using it, and that's one thing we can't get back. And so for somebody like me I have 3 daughters, they all play sports, they're in school, running a business, and then doing some other work. I don't know how I'd do it right now if I didn't have AI. To be honest with you, I feel like I get it so much more accomplished, and it's not impacting. Like I still get a good amount of personal time with my family, which is just awesome.
Yeah. Well, when we're rested, when we actually allow self-care in our schedule, even this, what we're doing with our work, the things that we're creating are so much better. And then just think, if you're well rested, you're taking care of yourself, you're giving yourself some time. Now you're working on your project and you're using AI to help supplement it. Man, you probably have a much better winning formula than somebody that's really just completely resistant, unwilling to embrace, because, it's like you said, it's here, it's not going anywhere. So I'm saying be friends with it. Just make friends with AI platforms and figure out where they can, how they can support you. How can AI support you to do even better and more with what you're doing right now, or with what you want to do?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I feel like there's a caption there, or like a logo we should capture. Like it's
Bumper sticker
be
for sure.
friends with AI, a bumper sticker. Yeah, like be friends with AI. It's here to help. So as we wrap this up, Tanya, can you tell our audience how they would, some of the stuff you're working on right now, how they get in touch with you? I think it's just awesome that in your field as a writer, as a content creator, that you're embracing AI, and so I could imagine people are going to want to find out how they can either use your services or,
Right.
or learn what you've learned. So
Right.
how do they get in touch with you, and what are you up to?
Sure, I become part of that in the Swiss Army knife. I'm just another one of those things. So you got AI, and then again, like somebody that's maybe very busy and has a great idea and has has the idea, and they have content, but they just don't have time, or their time is better spent doing other things in their company that make money. Using somebody like me that is not afraid of the AI and getting quite well versed in how to use it. Like, yeah, I can take that and still generate an authentic organic product and content for you. But I know how to use AI ethically, maintain your voice, and deliver the message you want to with that human element. So it's like now, like, I'm not the AI specialist, but I don't know, maybe one day. So finding me is pretty easy. So I'm working on, like I said, turning that last book into a course, doing some speaking on, like networking and social media, and how, again, social media, it's not going anywhere. And if you want to grow and build, you better become friends with it, because it's one of the quickest, fastest ways to put you and your product and your brand out there to all the eyes, out there. So you can find me on LinkedIn, my name, Tonya Fines. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and all those 3 platforms. I mean, my contact is there. So I'm very, very easy to find. And if you want to talk about, your brand vision and a strategy to grow it, I'm your girl. I can help you with that.
Awesome. And where can our audience members find your book? Where's the best place to get a copy of your book?
Amazon, just Amazon, and they can type in my name, Tonya Fines. I've got a couple books on there. or the title specifically, How to Become a Media Socialite and Monetize Your Passion, which I really fought writing that book. I really fought it. I did not want to write it, and I did not like the title, but I had friends that were like, no, you're doing it. And they made me do it. And it's basically, again, it's strategies and skills to, take your brand and start over.
Awesome. Awesome. So I just want Tonya, thank you so much for joining with us today. Last question. Do you have any ideas of work on any ideas for another book? I know you're working on a class right now, but can you give us some insight of what you'll be working on here over the next couple of years and what we should expect?
Ooh, what to expect? Well, I started writing a novel like 2 years ago. I do want to get that finished. That's not using AI. That's just purely cathartic, but it's a great story. So I'm hoping I would actually like to have that done by spring of next year. But the next book is probably going to be something about, the first book, that How to Become a Media Socialite, I think was a great number one in terms of the genre and what that talks about. But I think the next segue is going to be into the whole element of starting over, because life blew up a couple times for me. And I've had to start over. I had this last time. I had to start over when I was really thinking that was a point in my life that I was going to be retired and sitting on the beach, drinking margaritas and finishing my novel.
Nice.
Life had other plans. God had another plan for me. So when it comes to being I've lived in 3 countries now and had to start over in every one. I've started over twice here. There's something about that I think there's an audience for that, because lots of people have to start over. Sometimes the rug gets pulled up from underneath you and you find yourself in a place at a time in your life when you're like, now what? And it can look very grim. It can be very difficult to see the light. So I really do. I want that to be the second book. I joke that the title is going to be Starting Over 2.0, but that might actually be the title.
That's awesome. Well, Tonya, thank you so much for your time today. You shared I love your story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think you gave our listeners some really awesome things to take away. If you're starting out on a new venture, take some time and just breathe. Box breathing, you mentioned, right?
Yes.
And take it. And, secondly, take a 2-degree mind shift, right? Just take your time and think about what you're doing and just accept and embrace that mind shift that's required. And then be authentic. Don't lose your authenticity. Even with the use of AI, keep in mind, one of the things you shared with us that I'll take away is you've got to maintain that authenticity, because people innately know when you're being authentic and when you're not being authentic. And I believe that's going to become, as more people adopt AI, that's going to become so much more valuable, is that authenticity. So thank you again for sharing that with us. I'd encourage our users to sit down, think about some of the challenges you faced, take some of the advice that Tonya shared with us today. And in the notes, in the comments of this show, please feel free to share some of your use cases and some of the ideas you have on people just starting over, starting to learn AI, some of the things that they might be able to do to be successful as well. So thank you, Tonya. I definitely want to have you back on the podcast, at some point, because I feel like we touched on some other topics we could have dove into even more. We just, we don't have time today, but thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to chatting again.
Okay, awesome. And remember, folks, you can subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thank you. All right.